Hey, Abby.
Hey, Brad.
All right, let's get into it. What has you waking up excited these days?
I brought two things. So one is very life and one is very work. The life thing is we are finishing up first grade as a homeschool family. So my kid learned how to read this year and I had a lot to do with it,
Wow.
which was cool. And yeah, it's been like a big moment in our household. We got to go to Epic Universe, which is a new theme park here in Florida that just opened last year to celebrate him hitting his reading milestone last week. So
Amazing.
yeah, that's been like majorly
Oh,
fun.
congratulations. That's
Thank
huge.
you. Yeah, I'm working on the homeschool portfolio right now, and it's a lot of work to put together because we have like a review with the state at the end of every school year, and they have to see like examples
Wow.
of everything. So, working on all that. So that's my life thing that I'm very excited about, and also designing second grade is super fun. And then the work thing I'm really excited about is we're working on an event called the Sensemakers Salon at the Sensemakers Club, which I run. I'm not doing it, which is the best news ever because I'm a recovering workaholic micromanager. So there's an amazing volunteer team that like every day I wake up excited to see that they're making progress without me having to do anything other than believe in them. So that's kind of my two things right now.
That's incredible. So the one is it's like you're able to devote your energy towards your family, your
Yeah.
son's progression, and you get to see
Yeah.
the fruits of all of that
It's amazing.
labor, that hands-on labor.
Yeah.
And then that's come as a result of you delegating and
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Like I think about that all the time in terms of like I left my corporate world like 6 years ago.
okay.
And when I did that, I wasn't sure like exactly what that was going to look like or how long that would go on for. But it occurs to me now that it took me all of that time to build this net that would need to catch me. My kid,
Mm,
I didn't intend to homeschool. Like we went in that direction out of pure duress. So yeah, we're sort of like making it up as we go, but also somehow all of the decisions that I made over the last like 10 years have really like equaled this being something we could accept like as a change. So yeah, it's cool.
wow. Yeah, boy oh boy do I relate to that. It's like there's all this like very strange groundwork that you don't know you're doing that ends up coming to really put a
Yeah.
foundation in front of you that you're like, boy, oh boy, I'm glad that I busted my ass and did those things and didn't know it at the time, but now I'm reaping the rewards of that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and sometimes that stuff is painful. Like learning to read. I've had this conversation with my kid many times about like, you got to learn to read because it lets you do other things. And he doesn't want to read. It's like his least favorite thing. He's a math person.
Uh,
And so he's like
yeah, okay.
anti-reading. And I keep telling him like, you got to be able to do this thing you don't want to do so you can do all these things that you do want to do. And I feel like that a lot about the choices that I've made. It's like, it hasn't always been the most comfortable choice, but ultimately it's like leading towards what I do want to do.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you crossed this threshold that is ultimately like a pretty big ass decision of saying like leaving the comforts or the whether you can we could unpack what comforts are,
Yeah, we could call
but
it
like
comfort, but
the
I wouldn't.
yeah, yeah, but an existing job, right, and sort of out into the brave unknown, doing your own thing and stuff, and
Yeah.
that's all part of it. And I'm sure that that brought with it a whole bunch of things that you didn't necessarily want to do, but had to do in order to get to where you want to go.
There's a lot about being a small business that I don't want to do, but I continue to do because I want to be a small business. Like I do want to
Yeah,
be a small business, but it comes with a lot
yeah,
of it that I could do without. It was nice when all that stuff was handled, but then I also think about the loss of freedom that I had in that context, and yeah, I wouldn't
yeah,
trade it.
yeah. I think that there's no getting around that. Just anything you get into is going to have a lot of aspects that you don't enjoy, or it's not what is your calling, but you recognize it as that, like you're saying to your son, you do this to do these other things. It unlocks, in your case, like freedom and autonomy and the ability to make your own path.
Yeah, and you have to be bad at things. I'm not good at being bad. Are you good at being bad at things, Brad? I'm not good at being bad at
I
things.
I've learned. I've
Yeah,
learned how to be bad at things and to just like so much of it has to do whenever you get thrown into a bunch of hard, and you're into just brand new terrain. And I'm sure you've encountered your own version of that. But whenever you just are like, oh, cool, now all of a sudden I need to navigate a healthcare system and coordinate between three different medical teams in this very dicey situation, and also take care of all this other stuff at the same time, you kind of like learn to accept that you're like, yeah, I'm bad at this, or I don't understand this. I have really no choice but to kind of like embrace that and just roll with it. And frankly, I think that it's very liberating to just like be upfront and transparent with that. I think I see a lot of people get twisted into pretzels about not wanting to show their ass, that not wanting to show that it's like, I actually don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. In fact, I just got off of a call where that was the case, and the person is knowingly like they're, you know, a more junior person, more of like an apprentice kind of situation. But I think that there's a real hesitancy. You know, you want to do a good job, you want to prove yourself, you want to be competent and perceived as such. Boy, oh boy, I feel like the LinkedIn landscape, the state of affairs, I feel like there's not a lot of room for that kind of just like vulnerability or owning just, hey, yeah, I don't know about this.
Yeah, I feel like everybody is.
I'm bad at this.
Pick a specialty and get it into a sentence that you can put at the bottom of every post or perish. Like that's where we're at. And like we've completely eliminated the ability to explore. Like I feel like, you know, in the internet that you and I came up on, you had the ability to explore. You could completely change your focus, and that was okay because you had relative control over like what the internet knew about you. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
We don't have that. It is completely out of our hands. And I think, you know, for people that are in our generation, you know, we didn't have to battle that in terms of coming through. You know, we got to have that experimentation phase, be quiet and in private, relative private, you know, versus now you're failing in public. And I think that that's a really hard thing for people to grasp. It's something that I see as just like trauma from the corporate world. Like I see this all the time when training discussion leaders at the Sense Makers Club, that like I have to be the one that reminds them that they're a person and that their time matters and that they matter, and let them having the time to have lunch matters. Like they're so beaten down in some cases by these systems that it's hard to behave any other way, you know, because you've been incentivized to stay in that place for so long. So
no, and that's a real service that you're giving people, and a real gift that you're giving people. And that, look at us, you know, we're all a bunch of just human beings wearing clothes, living life, you know, sending kids to school, going to bed, you know, getting hungry. And it is so wild that we've kind of invented these whole worlds where we kind of pretend that this shit doesn't exist.
It's so wild. And also like we pretend that we're not all making shit up all day long. The entire thing is made up, all of it, from the very beginning. Go back, forefathers, made up. Go back further, made up. All of it made up, which means we can make it up, which I feel like that's something that I was given early in life, that perspective of like, you can just make it up. Like you could just decide what you want to do and then do that. And I don't even think that was like necessarily a good trait to have. Like in my early 20s, I think it was a little bit like a bulldozer. But now that it's softened, I feel like, I kind of feel about it in terms of like, I feel like it's my responsibility to tell other people that like, you're allowed to make shit up. Like I remember a couple of years ago, I was working with Alfia Lowe, who's a very close thought partner of mine. And he was working on this diagram, and it was like a renovation on the Ikigai, which is like the Japanese foundational idea of how to find like a purpose in your life. And it had been rendered 100 years later by some dude as a Venn diagram. And so Alfie was like playing with it, and he kept holding on to this person's language. And I was like, dude, why don't you just change it? It doesn't make sense for what you're doing. And he was like, I can't do that. Like, you can't do that. I'm like, no, you literally can. Open the document and change the label, and then put like a citation that's where you started, and you're done. Like, move on. And that kind of lesson, I think, is something that I found myself having to give to more people coming up in today's environment than I think we were had to. I think it was very like that's what was going on back when we came through. But now it's not anymore.
Yeah.
To be told, like the idea that people haven't written all the books, given all the talks. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and they're just like, yeah, but people have already given a talk about that thing. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't. Like, your jokes are going to be different. Your examples are going to be fresher. Your comparisons are going to be something we've never thought of before. Like, and you're robbing us of that right now. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's
Yeah.
something that more people than I would expect need to hear. And that's like all they need. You push them with that little thing, and then it's just like, see ya. That worked.
Yeah.
Nice.
What gets unlocked in that is a richer existence for everybody, right? We're all the beneficiaries whenever more people are out there sharing their perspectives, and it really takes. I always think of just like the scientific method, right?
Mhm.
It You can't just kind of the whole narrative of these single geniuses and whatever. It's like, no, dude, like all of this stuff has to be hit from every single angle, and it requires just different perspectives to all kind of like arrive in the same general ballpark, even if you tweak the label. It's like, yes, like this is the conceptually like what we're all kind of picking at here. And it's really, really cool to see that whenever you realize that it's just all, oh yeah, we're all just a bunch of overlapping Venn diagrams, and we're all kind of trying to figure out the bits that are shared between us. And there's a lot, but each of us has our own wholly unique experience. And like it is truly stunning that when you think about I always forget like how to pronounce it. Is like solipsism, right? Or it's like, yeah, you're the only person you can be sure to exist, right?
Yeah.
And how you perceive red or how you perceive a color,
Yeah.
you can only
Only
gauge
you.
that for yourself.
Yeah.
So it really takes like a bunch of people in aggregate that are able to be like, you seeing what I'm seeing? Like whenever you describe that, or you say
Yeah.
that, or you hear the sound in a certain way, you're like, you hear that too?
It says
You
sound
see
and
that
say, no,
too?
we don't know. We don't know. Like we're all agreeing that red is red, but we honestly don't know. Like my red could be purple and your red could be
Yeah.
blue. And I don't
Yeah.
even know how we would know. Like that's the wild part about information. Like so I've spent
Yeah.
my careers focusing on information architecture, and the reason is because information is the most sketchy material on earth. It's unbelievable. It leaks all over everything. It comes out of all things. And the most interesting part about it is that it doesn't exist outside of the mind of the person doing the interpreting. So, like,
Yeah.
content is out here, content. But what I think about this and what I call it, that's information. That's in my head. That's based on every experience I've ever had. And it's like very unique quilt of my mental model of like the whole world. I just find that so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like the idea that there's
Yeah.
objective truth to anything, just mind boggled that we could agree on
Yeah.
anything. And then every once in a while we agree on things for a while, and then we just decide, well, no, never mind. Like, did you
Yep.
learn Pluto was a planet?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
me too. It's not, by the way. So it's been demoted. But like, that's a really good example of like, we all thought that was true for a real long time.
Yep.
And just with new information, turns out not true. And it took the colliding
Yeah.
of like other sources of other influences to get there. And so, yeah, it's like, it's all this big kaleidoscope of like human experience and like us mashing things
Yeah.
together. So I think that's really adults that end their creative pursuit after school. It makes me really sad. Like when they just like go into the job and everything's about the job and they forget about that like higher level interest that they had in the subject that got them to go to the degree program to begin with. And I find
Yeah.
that people that can stick in that creative practice through their working professional life just have a lot more satisfaction with their career path
Yeah.
and a lot more options
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the ability to reinvent and cultivate our creativity on an ongoing, like as a practice, as a way of being, as a way of like being in the world, rather than this yep, oh yeah, that was then and this is now. Now, fully appreciate that, we all go through different seasons of life where certain things are more a priority and other things aren't. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I think that's been like one of the biggest drivers of putting this show together was like helping people reconnect with and understand their own creative capacity that is more an innate quality than it is like any sort of like external I used to play music or I used to do this or I used to do this and I don't anymore and that and it's I share what you said it's thoroughly depressing.
Yeah, I speak from major experience. Like I actually wrote about this when I first left Etsy, which was my last corporate job. I felt like in the like 5 or 6 years that I had given to that organization pretty exclusively, I had really allowed the rest of me to atrophy. And everything that I had put into my own creative pursuits had been taken over by this need to balance work and family, work and family, work and family. Because I'd also become a mom in that time frame. And so it was like a huge part of the decision to do something else was understanding that I couldn't balance all three of those things. Right. I had to, one of them had to lose. And
Something
like,
had to give.
there was
Yeah,
no
something
way.
had to give.
Yeah, there's no way I was consciously going to throw away my creative practice. Like that was the only thing that's made me happy for my whole life is being a creative person. So that one's not going to go. And I'm sure as shit not throwing away being a mom. Crazy. So bye bye corporate. Like that's, it really does come down to that. Like, and this many years removed, I can see it that clearly, but I can assure you that when it was in the moment, it did not feel that way. It felt very risky
Yeah.
and very uncertain and very like, oh my freaking God, am I really doing this? Yeah. And now I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Yeah.
That's that. Thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of people need to hear that. It is there. It again. It kind of comes back to this just weird. Oh, these other people have it figured out.
No.
These other people who are out there doing kind of what appears to be really cool and valuable and fulfilling things. It's like wow they
Oh my gosh.
must have just been on that path. And it's like yeah no this shit's hard and
Maybe we should spend the
it's
rest of the
only through
podcast talking
hindsight.
about like all the things we haven't figured out. We could do that like a whole podcast on the things we haven't figured out just in like in the last like month of life. Honestly.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we would absolutely do it. One of the things we could go there. One thing before we get like you're talking about this scene there, this transition and kind of, it sounds like a real reclaiming of your creativity and your creative self. What if like, were there specific practices or specific things that helped you kind of recultivate it, or was it
Yeah.
literally just like I just needed to get that 40 hours back or 60 hours or however long you were working
Yeah.
for someone else? Like what did you find to be helpful at recultivating your creative
Yeah.
self?
I would say, I mean, the space definitely helped, obviously, like the release of pressure. Although I'll be honest with you, and I think anybody that's left a corporate existence to not go to another one will understand this. The time is slow to come back. Like you don't actually believe that you have that time for a lot longer than you think. And it's sort of like a weird, like I think I have these 40 hours, but it feels like my body's not allowed to have them. So I don't think I should plan anything with them for a while. But no, I think that there was two aspects of those early years of reclaiming. One of them was recovery work. So I'm 6 years sober of alcohol. It's a huge part of my story.
Congratulations.
Thank you
Great.
very much. And then another huge part of it is I've been a pretty lifetime journaler. And so like getting back into a more active journaling practice, like back when I was working, I was doing a lot of just like jotting down. But like actually giving myself like showing up at my desk every single morning to do like the, the artist way, morning pages, full brain
Yeah.
dump of like multiple pages that you don't reread. That I did that for quite a while. And then I took a friend of mine, Ellen Olson Brown, shout out, did like a journal prompting course. And I had kind of hit a wall with my journaling at that moment. And that really helped me break through. There was a couple of them that was like really intense, like having to start every sentence with "I don't want" for an entire page. Ooh, dude, do that. Honestly, do that today.
It's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, and so I think that like journaling and time, yeah, I think time was a huge part of it. I started writing a new book fairly soon after I left, And that book became sort of like in process for me. I was the most that I've been in my creative life writing that book. When I was working on Stuck, I showed up at my desk at the same exact time every single day, and I wrote to a certain word count or a certain time every single day. And that was the only time that I had ever done something like that. I think it was because it was so early in my recovery that I needed something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like, I think the metronome of that. And then getting back into working with other people, that really helped as well. Like I started an event called Make Sense Miss not so long after I left Etsy. And that was like a storytelling event where I just was recruiting people to tell stories about like information architecture challenges that they had faced. And that kind of started like my brain going about like, wait a second, I kind of want to hang out with these people all the time. And I live in Florida. How are we going to make this work? Yeah, it wasn't so long after that I was like, maybe I have a club. Maybe this is a thing. Maybe, yeah. And all these years later, like, we have a club. It's a thing. 170 members all over the world.
Beautiful. So that sounds like just a clear path of, creativity leading to community as like almost like a pipeline of, it's like once you're sort of flowing and once you're sort of moving in a direction, and then you're able to sort of like hook up with other people who are going in a similar direction or operating in a similar space, it just becomes like a natural, well, obviously.
Yeah.
We should
I actually have like a theory about this. This is my late breaking theory. Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about the club and like what it does for people, because it's not courses, it's not people teaching each other, it's just discussions. And I've been thinking like, what is it that people get out of it? And I think that it's about confidence. Like, I think that you need to build a tremendous amount of capability to get to the middle part of your career. But once you're at that middle part of your career, you ostensibly know all of the brass tacks of that capability, right? And then you're sort of like, well, what do I do now? Like, where do I go? And I think that's where community comes in. Like, I think that peers are how we grow the confidence to go past our capabilities, right? And that's when we start pushing other capabilities. That's when we start like making new things, inventing capabilities. And I think that that's something that I'm really interested in helping inspire in other people. It's just like this idea that confidence is actually really integral to like being good at what you do. I think people, they do all the courses, they read all the books, and they still don't feel like they can stand up in front of a room of their peers and talk about the thing.
Yeah.
Right? But if they're put in the position enough times and they watch enough people do it and it's a safe enough space, one day they're going to open their mouth. And what comes out is going to be amazing in my experience. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
You hit on so many of, I feel like, the subterranean aspects of community and why we gravitate towards them. But I really love how you just described this kind of collective plateau that we get to on our own. But yeah, like it really requires ultimately, just like we were talking about earlier, it's like you see that red, you see that blue, you hear that sound. It's that connective tissue that creates this shared experience, but then also helps us all collectively elevate. And as you were describing that, I was just like thinking about the impressionists and the Parisian cafe culture and stuff, where it's like, here's a bunch of people who are kind of all in this moment in time, and they're all really gifted people. They've all kind of mastered the craft of painting up until a certain extent, and it's kind of, could each of them kind of gone on to create and push the boundaries and push things further on their own? Maybe, but because they're getting together and swapping the idea, Bauhaus, like look at any sort of cluster of, Bell Labs, like whatever. It's like, it's really, it's like, yep, cool. You get to this place where you're like competent in the mechanics, you're competent in the general skill set, but you kind of, at any one individual is not going to be able to just like power through on their own. And it's really like whenever you hook up with other people, you're able to transcend together.
Yeah, like ask any creator on the internet in their specialty what their moment was. I can tell you mine. I know exactly the moment that I was like not just like observing that there was community, but I was like invited into the community. And it was like in my late 20s by Drew Hinton at a random cocktail party. He and I talk about it at least every 5 years. But like, man, I'm really glad that happened. It'd been so weird if that didn't happen. Like what would have been, because I was at that exact place. I was 6 or 7 years into being an information architect professionally. I was running a team of information architects, like mostly contractors that I was mismanaging, but I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, it was like looking back on that time, I didn't know what to do with all that. All I knew was to keep getting higher paid jobs and moving up the management ladder. And to be honest with you, I wasn't even aware that there was a non-management ladder until I entered the community. And then people were like, oh, don't go, oh, wow. No. We got to back away from the manager ladder. Back away. You are not manager person. You're definitely IC person. And I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have known that I was a specialist.
Yeah.
That was something that was totally being driven out of me by capitalism. I was like, oh no, you're going to be a UX generalist. That's what you're doing. That's what we're doing. That's what the direction is. Until you get into the right group of peers and you're like, wait a second. That's not what I want, and that's not what I'm made for, and maybe we do something different. And ultimately, that's what it did. Yeah.
That's amazing. You're doing a great job at, I think, articulating these differences between, there are structures that exist, right? Whether that's a corporation or whether that's just whatever other sort of societal systems that we swim in. And there's all of us in many respects are going through those motions and living within these systems. And it takes something to kind of provide a different perspective on that. And that something, it's having that thing that kind of just shocks you out of just the motions of whatever systems that we're dropped into. That allows us to ultimately come back to ourselves. And that's something that's very uniquely, I think, like, human. We rely on humans to give us those sanity checks and those extra perspectives, and that is through that conversation and stuff that I think is really like fascinating, that we're able to sort of go like, oh yeah, because I'm sure that community wasn't just like, I don't know you at all, but don't do that. Like, I'm sure that they're like, they were like nice about it, or were they nice about it, or were they later.
Like years later they're like, hey, by the way, the management thing.
So it didn't happen at the cocktail party.
No, at the cocktail party he was like, you're awesome, you should be part of this Information Architecture Institute thing. Why aren't you part of this thing? Here's the website, go home and sign up. And I'm like, okay, I will do that. And I was the president of that organization like 5 years later. So
that's
like,
amazing.
That stuff matters.
Amazing.
It matters a lot. And like models matter too. Like role models matter a lot. And I think like community is also where you see role models outside of your job. Like when we see role models in our job, it's hard because they have all this like extra baggage of like, they work at the same company as us, and maybe we have weird stuff. But when you have mentors and people to look up to in a community sense, I feel like it creates all of this opportunity where like, I remember the reason I walked up to Andrew Hinton at that cocktail party was because he had given the closing keynote, and he was funny. Like he was really like delightful and funny and casual, but also like wicked smart and just really like on point. And so like just on message, like you could tell what he went there to say, and he said it, but he didn't make anybody feel like he was above them. And he didn't make anybody feel like he was like, oh, like, let me give you a lecture. Like it wasn't what I thought of when I thought of lecture. And I didn't know that was a thing. Like I'm a theater kid. When I saw that was a thing, I was just like, oh, sign me up. Where is the stage? Show me to the stage. I love this. This is so amazing. I think all the time about like, he didn't have to be the first one. I'm sure somebody else would have been that one, but he was the one that was there.
And you're touching on something that I think is also a pretty central theme of this show, which is around attitude and demeanor and this sense of we'll say possibility and optimism, and just almost kind of diffusing or disarming a lot of the standing on ceremony, or this is right and this is wrong. Like I personally like really love, humor and sort of stuff like that. I play those cards a lot because that's just kind of innately who I am. But like I've seen many different versions of it that just make people comfortable and invite people in and demystify or get like depedestalize
Yeah.
all of the things and just put us all on level ground so that we can do fun and good things together.
Yeah, I mean, I think bringing fun back into work is, I mean, I don't know if it was ever there, so maybe it's not bringing it back into work, but like bringing fun into work, I think is not the worst thing that we could do. Like on the best projects that I've been on, they're the ones that have inside jokes. They're the ones that have memes. They're the ones that have those hilarious moments where everybody ends up punchy on the call. And like that doesn't happen just because we all decided. Like it happens because the environment allows it. And yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, not a lot of environments allow it. A lot of people have to be kind of like armored up when they're in their
Yeah.
corporate job. And when you're armored up, you
Yeah.
have those authentic connections with people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're the model.
I'm
You know what I mean? You're the model. If the executive is the only model you're seeing, and that's the type of executive you're seeing, that's what you think you're turning into.
Yep. 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 Do you feel through your past job experiences, your current community endeavors and everything else like that sense of like fun or pulse, like I guess, have you found ways of cultivating that, or are there specific things that or conditions or environments that could be, is this physical, is this virtual get together, that stuff, those dynamics I think also play into that, like, oh, can you actually kind of create these more authentic connections, but also like are there either like rituals that don't feel cheesy or forced, or just like or how does it get cultivated in a way that just doesn't, like go, ugh, that isn't cringe.
Oh man, I feel like I'm gonna give the easiest answer because why not? Because I think it's true. Like honestly, this is where my brain went. I feel like you have to start inside of yourself. Like I cannot tell you how different I feel going into a room that I have to have control in now versus when I was in my mid 20s, right? Like when I was like a couple years in and I was still like, oh God, I got to prove myself in every meeting. I got to be the smartest person in every room. I got to like really be on my shit all the time. And like, if I compare those two, one of them was having fun and the other one is absolutely not. And she's terrified that she's going to get found out. And so, yeah, I feel like in my current life, all of my meetings are fun. I don't know why the fuck I would go to a meeting if it wasn't fun. I work for myself. Why would I
Yeah.
go? There's no non
Yeah.
fun meetings. But I think back then there was no fun meetings because I wasn't
Yeah.
able to have fun. Like I'm sure there's people that I knew back then that I'm still friends with, and even those people remark on how different I am now. And it has a lot to do with like becoming comfortable with being who I am instead of trying to pretend that I'm somebody else. Like I don't have to go in and pretend that I'm someone who's like really like cutthroat and like go right to the point just because I've been surrounded by men my whole career that are role models that are doing that. I don't have to do that. And I think when I finally accepted that part, my working style really changed. And yeah,
That's amazing.
happier. I think people that have meetings with me are much happier. I had a friend that I consulted with back in the day, and after a meeting with an executive one day, he goes, "You know what I like about you, Covert? You go right for the throat." And I swear to God, Brad, it was the day that I changed everything. I could not handle that that's the way somebody had described it because I felt coming out of that room, I felt like I was in some sort of like a fever dream. Like I'm like going into like a Quentin Tarantino film and then I'm like coming out into like a princess film. That's my real life, you know? And I'm like in there and I'm like guns blazing. It's like,
Yeah.
what the heck is who is that? But honestly, at
Yeah.
that point, I didn't have the ability to even go, as I call it now, like go to the balcony. Like I didn't have the ability to have an external view of myself. I was so tired of myself freaking the fuck out that I was going to get found out, in trouble, whatever, that it didn't, you couldn't even hear what was going on. And you just leave the room and have to trust other people's impressions or like the wrath that you left behind, which spoiler alert, I did really well in corporate America doing that, like really well. They just keep promoting me
Yeah.
because that's what they
Yeah.
want. They want you to go for the throat. And that person did like that about me because he didn't have to do it. And he felt somebody should. you know? And now I'm a person that doesn't feel like you should.
That's freaking beautiful because I think that and how you started it in the it's kind of cheesy, but it's going inward, and what you just described is like here are all these extrinsic motivators and extrinsic forces that ultimately leave you to behave in a way that doesn't feel true to your inner self.
Yes.
And when you are outside of an environment that where those conditions are no longer true, you're able to reconnect and
Yeah.
have a much better time.
I think parenting honestly healed a lot of it for me. Like, there was no way that I wanted to parent my child the way that I parented my clients. No way. No way. Like,
Why didn't you finish your Cheerios?
exactly. And it's like, why is that different? Why should that be different? Like, why should my interaction with other human beings be anything but pleasant? Why would I enter into unpleasant circumstances on purpose? And even when I have to enter unpleasant circumstances, I try to be pleasant, which maybe that's naive and silly or whatever, but I don't think so. I think it makes it better. Like, I had to go
No,
to the
no.
Social security office recently, and that was not fun. But like, those people looked like they were having a miserable time. The little joke at the person that I was checking in with made them smile.
Yeah.
Don't know if the smile was fake, but I kind of felt like we had a moment, and it was worth it for me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. There are those interactions where you're able to see through the thing because a lot of people that are in that office, nobody's there because they're like super jazzed about
Nobody's
it,
there
right?
for-
Like
no.
this is a chore. This is
Yes.
an inconvenience. This is not a pleasant thing.
No.
And you have the wherewithal to understand that dynamic and get out of your own ego or your own experience and are able to, as a result, have a genuine connection with
I try to.
somebody who needs it.
I do have a bad habit of doing this thing where I try to crack a tough nut, like somebody who like never is friendly, and I try to like friendly them, and it never fucking works. That never works ever, ever, ever. And so I feel like, yes, most of the time I'm trying to have a genuine interaction with people, but also I would say that my codependence comes out in those interactions sometimes, and I'm just being a fucking people pleaser. You know, it's like, this is so awkward. I have to release the tension for myself, and I think that probably is ego. You know, that's about my comfort, not about theirs. So, yeah,
Yeah, I'm
Humans.
guilty as charged as well. Sometimes whenever it's like, oh, okay, this is going to be you're going to make this difficult. All right, well, here we go.
I'm gonna crack joke.
And I'm gonna try. But and you are right that it's like some of it is just like my own discomfort, and sometimes I've learned to back off and just be like, all right, like
Just let
you're
me-
committed to it.
That's okay.
I get it.
They're committed to the
Yep,
bit.
that's okay.
Sometimes they're committed to the bit, just like you're committed to the bit. You know what I mean? They think you're just as.
What's fun though, I'm thinking of a specific garage door repair guy who had this, and it took a couple sessions. It took a couple
Oh, yeah,
rounds.
you really
because
worked
he had
on
to
it
first
first.
come out and,
Yeah.
and diagnose. I think that he did some work, frankly, like because it was like between like the first and the second visit, he kind of came back through, and he was like notably like he started off in the same level of kind of cold and clinical and just kind of
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to be here either kind of thing. And as time went on, it was like you kind of saw. So like it took a little bit. And I think that that's important because like in those interactions with like at like the Social Security office or like these things that you're like, I don't know if I made like a material dent in that stuff. Like a lot of that stuff, there's often like a lag or a drift or something that both good and bad experiences have on us. Like it's really through the passage of time that we start to actually feel the effects of some things. Like you were saying that like earlier about like your transition job versus out on your own, that it's like there's a real like inertia. And there's some subtle like subterranean stuff that doesn't always like, it's not super obvious or clear what shifted, but sometimes it is. It's just like that weird like rare friendly interaction or something that can really set a course in a different way.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily going to be around to see the result of that in
No.
that person.
Yeah. You don't know what's going to I'm thinking back to the information part of our conversation. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, the person at the Social Security Administration could have like a checklist next to them and they make a check every time somebody says that cheesy ass joke to try to make their day. And they could, as soon as I walk away, they could have rolled their eyes at the person next to them and been like,
Yeah.
number 26 today. And I have not thought about it until this moment, Brad. Not once. So
More likely, I think that people are craving a pulse. They're craving that, A for effort, if for anything else. I think that's all I'm after really at the end of the day is it's just like just give me something. Just give me like something that like tells me you're alive as well. And even if it's just like a small little thing and you're not going to crack a smile, that's fine. You know what really helped for me though? I had an English bulldog named Ziggy, and the most hardened, straight-laced, just kind of miserable dude walking down the street. Like Ziggy could just like soften any person up. It was like he just was like so dopey, so goofy. He was like my secret weapon to just like automatically just see more smiles. It was pretty amazing. So like we there would be these times where you're just like, oh, this is like these dudes are hard and they are not happy, and it's just like doesn't matter. Yeah, it's amazing.
I really love that. The worst offense that I ever saw of a customer service person not crack a smile at a great joke was on 2 days before I married my husband. We had to go and get our marriage license, and we were eloping in New York, so it's fairly easy. You just like walk up to a counter and you pay and you get a license, and then 2 days later you show up and you get married. So as we're stepping up to the counter, he pushes his credit card across the thing and goes, "One wife, please." And the guy just doesn't smile at all. Like he's nothing. There's nothing. And it was so awkward. We were just like, really? Nothing? So that's one we still talk about to this day.
Meanwhile, you're like, this is the man of my dreams. This is who I am marrying.
It is his first dad joke. It is pre-dad by many years, but it is his first official dad joke for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, it's like, no doubt, right? That dude has to just be subjected to some of the worst stuff in the world.
Absolutely.
So it's like
We've heard that joke before.
It's like, but it's less about the joke and it's more about just like it's like probably just some form of coping mechanism that just is like I'm in survival mode. I'm just like trying to like get through the day. And it's like on one hand, it's like, man, I get it. Like that's got to be a tough gig. But also, do you really like
people are getting married, dude?
Yeah. It's like this is one of the good ones. This is one of the good like
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. No, I can totally see why he would be all armored up, but also, man, for my comfort of that story, it would have been better if he would have laughed. But actually, I think it's better that he didn't. Honestly, if he would have laughed, we probably wouldn't even remember the story.
Yep. Yeah.
Like we remember it because it was like transgressive that he didn't laugh.
Yeah. You're like, okay, all right, gotcha, buddy.
Yeah.
So Abby, what don't you know? What don't you know?
Oh gosh, what don't I know? Oh, I've got a really good one. I don't know how to teach my 7-year-old about being safe on the internet. I have started looking into this problem because it is a real problem. We are taking on internet safety as a second grade subject. But what I've come across is that there's a lot of baseline humanity concepts that you have to teach in order for any of it to make sense at all. So, for example, and maybe this is because my son is naive, but at 7, he has never been around an unsafe person. And he doesn't understand the concept of an adult being malicious towards a child. And so very early in talking about this internet safety thing, it occurred to me that like, I am going to have to teach him about the world in order to teach him about the internet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm like, we haven't covered, we've covered biology and reproduction, but we haven't covered what he calls romance. And I'm not ready for a 7-year-old to have that conversation, but there's parts of that conversation that are like required information for this internet safety stuff to make sense. And so, yeah, like he keeps saying the same sentence to me over and over again. This is the thing I don't know is when you say they could hurt me, what do you mean? So please don't answer me. I'm sure that you don't have an answer for this. I feel like I should let you off the
No,
hook.
I mean we're no we're in the same boat, right? So our daughter's
Yep.
8, and same deal, and we talk a fair amount, I think, about, we'll say vaguely, like what you're saying, and I think that there is like an age appropriateness, like to a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff, where it is like, yeah, you don't necessarily need to like get like way in the fray there, but I do like some of her neighbors and friends have turned the corner where they're able to play online games with like some like on like a server where there's like a chat, and like for us that isn't allowed, right? Like we can play and she has like her buds over, and that's I grew up playing huddled around a small TV set, playing video games with my friends, so I'm cool with screen time, provided it's like a social thing, and I'm cool even if it's like, ah, yes, like we kind of have some YouTube activity that's like there, that is, sanctioned, and there's like a couple channels that she's gravitating towards, and we're like checking it out, monitoring it, but
And you can do
she
nothing. There's
knows.
nothing you can do. That's the thing I feel like we should say out loud.
Yeah.
There is nothing you can do to monitor YouTube for your child. You can't block a channel.
Nope.
You can't keep them from going to a channel. There is nothing that you can do in the YouTube world to control that. I assume that there are third-party things that you might be able to do, but I haven't found
It's
it.
abysmal. Like
Yeah,
it's
really hard.
abysmal. I
You had to
was
completely
pretty
cut off YouTube.
shocked.
Yeah, it's gone
Yeah.
from our life. That's
Yeah.
why we're doing internet safety. I've actually, because he's very upset about it, and he feels as if he's missing out on the world because he's not on YouTube. And so basically, the deal that we made is if he can do a 12-week internet safety course with me, then he can have access back to YouTube. And
There we go.
yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Modern homeschooling,
Everything is
ladies
12
and
weeks.
gentlemen.
Everything's
That's
a 12-week course. I'm just like, you want to do that? We got to do a 12-week course on that.
but it is interesting where it's just like, just even the one thing that my daughter does seem to understand is it's just like, okay, like there's like language as like a thing where she's like, oh, this person like said this, she'll come home from school and she'll be like, guess who said this word, and that's like kind of front page news. So she seems to get it from that lens at least, but not through like anything more harmful. But at the same time, she's like, oh, I understand why I'm not allowed to just fire up, join a game on a server where there's chat, and because
Yeah.
people could be like saying bad things. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine for now. I suppose.
Honestly, I was very impressed that Google has a curriculum for kids. It's for second through ninth, I think, and it's called Be Internet Awesome. And it's a classroom curriculum, so it's made for a teacher to walk through with a group of kids. So I've worked on a version of it that's like just for like a parent and child to go through. So I'm happy to send it to you, Brad, if you'd like to go through it with your.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
I
That's
think
great. Yeah.
there's some interesting things in there, like sorting activities of like different types of personal information, and like if you are in a chat, like is it okay to say what you had for dinner last night? Yes. Is it okay to say the neighborhood that you live in? So it's like
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that they really do need to be taught, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we pick at that with a bunch of the kids. We got a good smattering of school age kids in our little neighborhood, and from high school, middle school, elementary school, and we pick at that stuff. We're like, tell tell me about AI, or tell me about like
AI. Yeah.
so or TikTok, or tell me about this, and like what does your school do or teach around this, and they're just and it's always just like very, very, very depressing. Now I'm sure that if the teachers and instructors in the school apparatus was hearing them say that, they would probably be like, oh brother, because we do more than that. But at the same time, hearing these kids say that, you're just like, oh boy,
I mean,
these kids are not getting the education that is kind of required for this day and age.
when I see how slow like our industries are to react in terms of the education to the technology, I completely understand why public education would not be up to date on
Hmm.
technology trends. Like they're literally just getting laptops in schools right now. It's like we're kind of done with that now. We don't really want laptops in schools. We've actually done all the research to figure out that that was a really bad idea. Whoopsie! And it took so long. Now it's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
the pace of education is slower than technology. I think in the pace layers
That's for sure.
that is definitely the case. So
It's so tricky. And yeah, like humans, adults, we see it at an organizational level, right? You get to see like kind of the adoption curve and just awareness versus, oh yeah, we're dipping our toes into this thing or that thing or whatever versus, ah yes, we have like a mature practice or we're whatever. So it's like we've seen it over the arcs of our careers, just kind of like how long it takes things to go from
mhm.
this exists to this is like fully internalized,
Yeah,
and it's a freaking journey.
it
Holy
is like
moly. And it's not an
AI.
even one. It's not a 12-week program.
No, it's not a 12-week program for sure. But AI is an interesting example of that because like I feel like I fell into the laggard category for AI like unknowingly. I wasn't paying attention enough to like its impact on our industry while I was, not in our industry. And yeah, I feel like I kind of like woke up and oh my gosh, all of a sudden we're at like peak adoption and I have no idea how that happened. But if I look back through the discourse, it's like, God, people that have been working on AI probably think, well, finally, we're getting somewhere with this thing because they've been trying for a long time. So, yeah, it's interesting. Everybody's like on their own timeline of their field, and then their life is a slightly different one. Like, there's a whole aspect of like, if you plant a tree, you're not actually going to enjoy the shade of it, but it will provide shade. So, like, is that enough? And I think, like, in discourse,
Yep.
a lot of it comes down to that. Like, the thing that you bring up might take your entire life to take hold. And one day it could be the thing that you're remembered for. It could be the thing that provides shade.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is really to see that. I think about that all the time in this day and age, just because there's so much now. There's been so many like posthumous artists and musicians or painters or just other people that I've recently been surprised by that I was like, oh wow, they weren't around. I didn't know. So Rachel Carson is from Pittsburgh, and we got the Rachel Carson Bridge and the Racing Carson Trail and all of this stuff. I didn't know that she wasn't around for the success of Silent Spring. That so she was just like laboring for years and years and years,
Oh,
and
there's a
I
lot of,
didn't know
yeah.
until very very recently that I'm like, whoa, okay. And yes, whether that's Otis Redding and certainly like Van Gogh and other people, it's like
Yeah.
yeah, like that impact a lifetime of work or whatever. It's like Dock of the Bay. I didn't realize that with Otis Redding, he recorded that, died. Steve Cropper and the rest of the backing band at Stax Records, like they had to like go in afterwards and
No way.
record that song and then release it in a
Oh, wow.
hurry. There's a great documentary about Stax Record in Memphis, and he was just like, I hate that song. Like it was like it was the worst experience of my life
How
because
could
it's like
anyone hate that
here's my
song?
life, but it's like my friend died, and then
Yeah,
they're
and then
like,
they
shit,
made
we gotta
me.
release a record. We need you to go play on this so that we can release it and kind of like not quite cash in on this tragedy, but at the same time, kind of. And boy, oh boy, but I think about like all of like this stuff now, where it's just like so much is being born, like so much we are able to create. It's a lot. The bar is so much lower that it's just like how in the absolute world are just even our future selves, but certainly future generations, going to sift through all of this stuff and like
Ooh.
who's been doing like really like good work in their era that just like they got it right. They're not going to be around to sit under the tree like you said and get that shade, but like they were there humming along, getting all the things right, and weren't around to reap the rewards.
Well, in the world of the internet, I feel like everything is sliding off of this invisible cliff too. Like people change blogging platforms or just stop paying their URL domain fee, and the next thing you know, like everything that they've ever written on the internet is gone. Like there was a
Yeah.
publication called the Pastry Box, maybe like
Oh,
10
I
years ago.
love
Do you
the
remember the
pastry
Pastry Box?
box.
I was
I
like, oh
sure
my
did.
gosh,
I contributed to it.
I did
Yeah.
too. And I'm like, man, that was some of the best writing that I did in that season of my life. And like, it's nowhere. I don't even think I have a copy of it anymore. And it's so weird to think about, but like, that's so common. Like when I was working at the Information Architecture Institute, we did this project that was, I called it a barn raising. And it was like our library, which was just a list of links, was 60% deprecated. Just like all the links were dead. And so we assigned volunteers to like go and find the new links. Well, 10 years later, I go into that spreadsheet and all the links are dead again. Like all of that work is just gone. And it's unbelievable. Like, God bless the Wayback Machine, but it's not enough. Like, that's not enough to
Yeah.
like save this discourse that is falling off of a cliff. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and as somebody who, yeah, it's like my entire existence, and I owe everything to the fact that I have this blog and have been at it for as long as I have. But even me, I've been it's been a little bit because, like you said, like changing blogging platforms and stuff like that. Like that's like where I'm at right now, and so I'm in this like very like weird thing. But it's so eager to be able to have the headspace to be able to like address that, because I have so much that I want to, like, the fire hose is kinked right now,
Yeah.
and in order to unkink it, I need to do some tech things in
Need a
order to make
redirect
that happen.
strategy.
But like back to community and back to just like visibility and sharing and like doing all of like that stuff, it's really in the lived memory of everybody, where it's like that a spreadsheet is going to die, right? Because it's like behind like closed doors. And so there's really just like this I have this instinct, and again, my tech infrastructure is currently kinked, but I'm so excited to break through there, because I'm like, my theory, at least, I'll try it out on you and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, is like you collectively keep the ball in the air, right? You collectively, it's almost like how trademark works. It's like trademark works and is enforced by usage. If you like trademark a thing like legally, but you're like not out in the world actually like using it, well then like somebody else can kind of come in and they could actually say like, look, like this thing is dead
Yeah.
or stale. So it's really through like the kind of communal effort
Yeah.
that we kind of keep these things alive. And that's why this moment in time is such a weird double-edged sword, where you kind of have AI coming in and simultaneously like polluting a bunch of things, but also providing a lot of people the superpowers and the ability to finally get their personal site up and out into the
Yeah.
world, and to start writing and to share the thoughts
Yes.
that are in their heads, because that was prohibitive, especially the way that the field has gone, and where it's like, oh, you need to like learn React, and you need to like get a master's degree level education just to get your website off the ground. And it's like,
Yeah.
in many respects, we're kind of back to literally the meeting I was on just before. We were just like, in so many respects, we're just back to, here's a couple files, here's a folder with some images in them, and that's all you need to make a website
Have
now.
fun.
And that's always been true, but like some weird thing happened where it just got way more complex than it needed to be. And so we're now in a place where the opportunity is there, and that's not to say
Yeah.
it's a given. And that's why I think it takes like our collective efforts to just like kind of keep this stuff going, and to make it easy, and to make it fun, and to make it communal, to be linking to one another again, and having these kinds of conversations. So it's how do we take this, which feels very natural, right? Like conversation, and just kind of translate that back into the digital world, where whenever we got started putting things on the internet, it was more prohibitive, right? You did require it.
Yeah.
It required some know-how. It required some technical chops, and we're now at a place where it's like, if you got something to say, it's actually never been as
Easier.
easy to say it, and to do it on your terms. I think that's really like that's the crux of like the indie web movement and all that stuff. But like whenever you like look at that stuff, at least historically, it's been like, it still feels kind of overwhelming to people. There's like, oh, there's some tech it gets into like the techie weeds, I think, a little bit more than
Totally
most
more.
people would like.
Yeah, Dreamweaver and AI are not the same. Like Dreamweaver could not take down your computer, you know? Like AI can you can screw that up. Like you can really do some damage. I speak from experience of vibe coding myself into quite a pickle. But no, I feel like that's something I've been really interested in this because like I'm really wondering if it is a new group of people or if it is the same persona of people that is using these AI tools to quote get their message out because I don't know, it feels very similar to me in terms of the people and the voices and the executions. Like I'm seeing a lot more democratization of the technology layer, but I don't know that it's really spreading outside of the technology industry. Like, for
Yeah,
example, I don't know if my neighbor down the street who's never worked in tech is able to vibe code something. I don't think so.
yeah,
I think that would
yeah,
be like, even though they can access ChatGPT, even though they could like, you know, ask for what they want, it's going to give them something that they are not going to know what to do with. And then, like for somebody like me who's not a coder, I can work with ChatGPT or an AI to get all that onto
yeah,
places on the
yeah.
internet.
You're adjacent. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
because I
adjacent.
know
You
how it
understand.
works.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but like I remember
yeah.
as like a very young print designer in my first IA job, I was right out of print school, and this engineer sat me down and taught me about like the front end and the back end and the middle tier, and it was like, oh, you know, and like I haven't given that lesson to my neighbor down the street who doesn't work in tech,
Yeah.
you know, so it's like I feel like it has the potential but it still is a technical adventure. So I think that like
Yep.
it's not fully democratized, nor should it be at this point because it's actually a
Yeah.
death trap. But you know, we could talk about that.
I do think like the word facilitate has been something that's been very front of mind for me lately. And what you're describing, your neighbor down the street, is kind of what I've been working on. I've been calling it kind of mouth coding, because it's we're literally coding with our
I love
mouths.
that word.
But
That's so
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Mouth
But
coding.
my my wife works at a counseling practice, and the owner of the practice, not a technical person, but as the owner of a small business, she's got her Wix website, and she's, you
Yeah.
know, she knows it leaves a lot to be desired. And we were able to have a conversation together where I was able to sort of like facilitate the creation of the website, right? Like I'm kind of coming in with like a little bit more of like the technical know-how, but where she is able to articulate her vision, her mission, how she serves the community, her core values, all of that stuff. And we started there, and it was so great because we were ostensibly talking about the website, but we didn't get into the website at all until like 45 minutes into the conversation. And then we were able to go, so let's turn all of that, what you just told me, into the website. And sure enough, there's a website that is like perfectly articulating the stuff. So I'm starting to do this more with like trying to get into doing this with like nonprofits and stuff. So I have like a few folks lined up, which I'm super excited about because these are people who are doing amazing work, but
Mhm.
they're the ones that have been either intimidated by technology or preyed upon, or, you know, there's a whole
Yeah.
industry of,
Oh yeah.
you know, we're going to, yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
how do you, like, in your own words, you know, like describe what it is you do, describe your values, describe where it is what you're wrestling with, what audiences you're serving, all of that stuff. Just like, just get it all out. And what I think is so like genuinely exciting for me in this moment is that those people who are very, very skilled, very gifted, and very, you know, doing these very noble things, but don't have the technical firepower or enough bankroll to have professional designers and developers on hand. Well, guess what? Now we, professional designers and developers, can help like facilitate the
Mhm.
creation of the stuff, right? So it's kind of what, at least on paper, the gig has always been as a designer
Yeah.
or developer. Is like, oh yeah, we're going to come in, we're going to like do this research, or we're going to do all this stuff, and it's like,
Yeah.
but now we just get to like do it kind of like real time and live and react to something and like get that the person who's in charge of donations and the other person that's in charge of like the operations and these people that are like bring them all in like that, like it's a party, like let's like get everybody in here, everybody say your wish list, everybody say what you care about, everyone say like what you're scared about or the things that you don't want to have happen, and let's just like bang this out and get something, like synthesize it all and put it into an actual container right now, like on this call. And like the people that I've done this with, they're like, holy
Whoa.
shit.
Yeah, it's like magic.
Like, holy shit, holy shit. It really is. It doesn't feel like the whole make me a website for a nonprofit. It's emerged from this very like organic conversation. And I'm like, this feels like a very healthy design process. This feels like a very healthy development process. It's not to say that it isn't rigorous, but we're not like allowing the spreadsheets and the personas and the wireframes and the specific languages to ultimately like get in the way and add friction to this process of just kind of going, we're here to make a website together. Let's get to it. It just feels more direct and I'm frankly I'm here for it.
I'm fascinated to hear like how this progresses, because like while you were talking through the example, I was simultaneously like, yes, that would be excellent in the context where you're working with kind people that are doing things all in the same direction. Also, if you were talking about a corporate environment right now with all sorts of like ego and power play, and you did exactly what you just said, you just created a nightmare. Like I got an email from somebody a couple weeks ago, and they described that a designer and a developer had been locked in a room with a CTO for 2 days vibe coding. And it was basically like a hostage situation that this person was witnessing. And so like that's where I go with it, Brad. It's like I totally think that it all comes back to like, if we think about information architecture in its earliest days of the web, the thought was that like the more thinking and pre-planning that you put into what you're creating, the more future-proofed it is, right? And the idea of like being able to do that all in real time, live, like I just want to know like where it breaks. Like how big is the organization in which that no longer works? Like is it like a one apple spoils the cart? Like is it a personality thing where like the wrong person in that mix is going to mess it up? Is it a number of people? Mm-hmm. Is it a context window and like tokens issue? Like I don't know, but I feel like it definitely breaks at some point. And so but that's the concern that I have, is like I feel like a lot of the like best practice and wisdom from like 15 years ago was from making mid-sized websites. And the problem was that we took that and tried to make really fucking big websites and web apps using that same logic. And guess what? That doesn't actually work. And so now we have like an internet full of useless garbage products, and they all look exactly the same. And we've all decided that those are best practices. I'm like, I assure you they are not. I fucking assure you they are not best practices. But here we are. If I get into a room with a couple people from an organization and they're all pointing in the same direction, and they actually have knowledge of their audience, and they actually know what they want to accomplish, and they know what they're trying to say, and the only thing that's in the way is the technology part, hang it out. But when one of those things doesn't exist, somebody in your position is all of a sudden in a nightmare. And I think that's what I find to be like the nuance, I guess, of practice.
Yeah. And it really, I think, comes back to what we were saying earlier about just like so much of this has to do with like psychological safety and just like the vibe of like in the spirit of like how you're sort of arriving at things. And a lot of these like conditions in these environments aren't conducive to kind of good human being collaborations. And so that's why now that I'm like less beholden to that apparatus, I'm now like, ooh, here's all of these like really like underserved, like small scrappy folks that actually have really dialed in their mission and have been operating for a long time, doing a whole lot with a whole little. And what if we kind of like supercharge this stuff and get their mission out into the world a lot more? But it does, it kind of like reframes just kind of like how people are organized, how people are structured, how like,
Yeah.
what does alignment look like who needs to be involved? Yeah, is Gary's presence in this meeting going to torpedo this whole thing because they're gonna
Gary!
Gary's coming in hot. We've been in enough of these meetings with
Oh,
Gary where you're like, oh my
absolutely.
God, like everyone changes.
Everything
Everyone
changes. The
changes.
gravity of the room changes with some people entering it, and that
Yeah.
power, like I feel like we can't get around that. And like that actually is a good place to kind of like tie this up in a bow. Is like I think that you and I have power in that we have a voice in this space that people look to for expertise on how to deal with really complex things. And obviously, we're coming
Hmm.
from different specialties, but I think that we share that. And so, yeah, I feel like a responsibility let people know that, like, if their CTO is locking them in a room right now and asking them to vibe code through the thing, and that is a gravity shifting power dynamic, then, like, that's not what we're talking about. Don't do that. That is not a
Hmm.
best practice. And so, yeah, I think like
Yep.
it can
Yeah.
be it can be fun to work outside of the system, but when people are looking at us from inside the system for wisdom, feel like
Yeah.
yeah, like obligated to kind of like do the translation sometimes of like, oh, but I can't see this working in corporate. Don't even try it. Don't even try
Oh yeah.
it.
Boy, oh boy, that's just been such like a tried and true sort of thing. It's such like a meme at this point or a trope where it's just like, yeah, this is all well and good, Brad, but it won't work here and all of that stuff. And it's like, but you don't understand. And I'm like, let me guess. Heavily regulated industry. Let me guess, like legacy tech stack. Let me guess, distributed teams. Let me guess, and it's just like, but you don't understand, Brad. We are, this bank, or we are this
Yes.
airline, or we are this
Yes.
whatever. And it's just like, and everyone's saying the same things, right? And like,
Yes.
I think that one of the coolest things about our ability to kind of like puncture through a lot of like that apparatus and remind everybody, as you said really well earlier, just like everybody's just human beings. We're all just showing up, and that it's okay, and that you actually can cultivate that within the walls. And that's been, I think, the gigs that have been the most fun for me is where we've actually had the authority to basically go, you all are going to sit next to each other now, and that's going to solve half of your problems and stuff. And it's like
Yeah.
that's genuinely like adopting or helping facilitate like a more humane and human
Yeah.
human culture.
Asking how are you and wanting to know the answer would be enough. That would be a huge improvement.
Yes.
If people ask how
Yes.
are you and
And
wanting to know the answer, the world would be so much better. I very
that's it.
specifically always wait for somebody to reply. And if they give me the rote reply, I always go, no, seriously, how are you? Because if they do go, good, how are you?
There it is.
I'm like, no, like, how are you? I asked.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for a. Here we are,
Meanwhile,
punching into the
meanwhile,
social
yeah,
interaction.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
thank you.
How
I don't
how
want
are
it.
you? How are you? And they have a virtual background blurred, and you just see like three beings, three small children running around. Like I've been on those
Oh
calls where
yeah,
it's just like, you clearly have some stuff going on. Like you don't need to like put on a brave face here. Like you
yeah,
literally have three children
yeah,
running around in like the background, and it's okay if
yeah.
you just like need to like duck out of this. Like what we're talking about here is not
I
doesn't require your full.
yes, I had somebody dial into a one-on-one with me probably 6 months ago, and they were in their car, and I was like, "What's going on?" Like they weren't usually in their car for this one-on-one. I'm like, "Why are you in your car?" And they're like, "Oh, I had to go. So and so needed to go to the doctor, and like, and then I had to like grab lunch, and I didn't get home." Blah, 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 blah." And I was just like, "We can reschedule the meeting. We should just reschedule the
Yeah,
meeting. I don't think that you should be
yeah.
talking in a Zoom call in your car right now." Like, I don't even think we had an agenda like this. There's no reason for this.
It's
But I
all good.
do
It
need
is
that they
all
need that
good.
permission. They need to be reminded that they're people. You know, like you're a people.
You talked about modeling earlier, and I think that this is advice for anybody wherever they're at. Is like you can model that
Yeah.
in other people. If you see other people flustered, or like you're on that call, or you're waiting on something, or like you see they need, like it's just like, just give them that grace, give them that permission.
Yeah.
And like even if it's not reciprocated, again, it's like that might be that these are the small seeds, these are the small actions
Yep.
that can ultimately end up having that like bigger ripple effect because it eventually does
Yeah.
get reciprocated and it can take root and stuff. So it's like it's not impossible to do this. And I've always gotten really bummed when people are just like, oh yeah, well Brad or oh you Abby, of course like you guys could do this, but like you don't understand. Like I'm trapped, I'm a prisoner, and I'm like, I promise you that isn't the case unless like
Mm.
you're actually trapped in a room by your CTO and
Dude,
like
it's happening.
you
It's
have agency,
happening.
you have
It's
yeah.
happening.
But
Send a
all to
signal.
say
Like, yeah, it is
yes,
definitely
yeah.
happening. But to your point, like there is agency involved. I think that there's like this conversation is making me feel like we should absolutely talk about privilege at some point because it's like, yeah, we have been very privileged to sit above some of these problems enough to be able to see them as meta patterns, and people that haven't had the benefit of that experience where they haven't been able to like dive bomb into businesses that are at really critical moments of their growth and like be given everything in terms of access, like that's a very uncommon position to get. And I
Hmm.
think when you haven't had
Hmm.
that, it is really easy to believe that you are unique. And I think like terminal uniqueness is definitely like a problem that it creates it creates like mental monsters. It's like you think that
Yeah.
like there's no way that anyone could ever tame the monster because I can see it and it's really big. But honestly, in my
Mhm.
experience, if you can get them to like draw a picture of the monster, they immediately are less scared of it. And it's like just
Mhm.
that knowledge of like get it out of your head, because when you see that okay, fine, it is 5 content management systems that are all controlled by 10 teams, but honestly you probably thought it was more like 17 before you drew it,
Yeah.
and you were
Yep.
probably talking
Yep.
about it like it was a huge thing. How could I ever even make a list? And then you make the list and you're like, oh, okay,
Yep.
well, and then you can start to,
Yep.
break it down. I think that that's, I have a
Yeah.
poster on my wall that my grandfather made that says, to eat a whale, you must first cut it into very small pieces. And I look at that every day and think, yep, that's it. You just gotta, there is no eating a whale.
That is
There is
beautiful.
no eating a whale.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love everything you just said. And I think that, yes, you're right. There's the privilege, but then I think that the other word to put on the table is diversity, where it's like in a diversity of different perspectives, just as we were sort of talking about earlier with like the shared experience, right? You have those people that are deep in the trenches and they are carrying with them a very important perspective. And it's the coming together of all of those different perspectives that ultimately allows you to, you know, get out of some situations that otherwise individually you're gonna just stay in the muck. You're gonna stay in whatever situation you're in. So it's that it does really require just these different perspectives, just like you received whenever you got pulled into that community, where it's just like, oh, here is a different perspective
Yep.
that ended up shaping your arc.
Yeah. There's something that I feel the need to tell people that haven't spent time in consulting, which is that, like, when you're consulting, first of all, you don't know what's going to happen after you leave. So there's a lot of like shipping ideas that happens. But also, I have never one time been on a consulting engagement where people that worked there didn't already know what the problem was and how to fix it. Never.
Yep.
Never one
Yep.
time. So then it's
Yep.
like, well, but why do you get to come in and be the person that says it and they actually listen? And I'll tell you, the answer is very simple. The answer is that the incentive changed to the point where they needed a specialist to fix it faster than they could fix it internally. And that's always the answer. It's the answer is the incentive shifted. Like, you might have been saying that your content management system is shit for years, or you didn't have one, or whatever it is. It's not until they got acquired by that company that requires them to do XYZ, that needs the content management system to be a certain way, that all of a sudden they're like, oh, look at that. We found the time and money. We found the time and money. And we brought in this person who's going to tell us all about
Yep.
it. And everyone's like, we've been saying this for 5 years, that this is the problem. This is what we
Yeah.
should do about it. And I hear from people all the time that are really annoyed by that dynamic. And I want them to understand that it's not because we're special unicorn people that can sell it better or the glitz is on it or whatever. It literally is a moment. It is a moment that is like striking. And if you strike too early, you're not going to sell it. Like, in every engagement I've ever done, if I had gone in 6 months earlier, they would have laughed me out of the fucking room. Single
That Yeah.
Every single one. Because when am I called? I am called when things are a fucking mess. So when I go in ahead of time, when they're not that messy, and I go like, you guys are gonna have a mess. If you don't do this, you're gonna have a mess. They're like, whatever, screw you.
We're good.
Okay,
We're good.
okay. And then 6 months later, it's like, you're not gonna believe what happened. I'm like, oh, is it a mess? There it is. And the employees always know. They always know. Not
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
all of them. They all know.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
painful. I think that that is the painful part.
I have always hated that dynamic because yeah, we've felt the people who are living this stuff day in and day out and have been shouting themselves hoarse for years,
Yeah.
trying to fix things. And it's like I fully appreciate and understand how that could go feel sour whenever it's like, oh, it's like finally getting addressed, which should be a happy moment. And that's where like that our responsibility is to basically like connect with them so that it's like their burden, you know, we're mind melded and it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you totally get it, and
You can
I'm
fix
just
it.
here to
Yeah.
like deliver your message effectively. And when people hear themselves and feel heard and feel validated and feel like they were able to speak their mind in a safe way and then like hear it reflected, then it's just like that's whenever it's like it doesn't feel as like these extra people came in and they did something that I've been saying for years, and instead it's more like a we got our connection time.
Yeah.
Right, just like the person at the social security.
Exactly.
we have our time, we
had
make
our
the
time.
connection,
Yeah.
then I deliver some news on your behalf, and then we high five
Yeah.
and do good things
You
together.
know,
So,
like if you don't give those people flowers when you're in that position, you're messing up. Like at that point,
yeah, yeah,
you gotta like the respect of listening to the history, the respect of listening to their nightmares about what they're afraid of is going to happen. All of that to me is gold. Like it almost always is the
yeah.
is like the thing that's keeping them up at night is the thing that I am very, very glad that they told me about because it is the thing that will crush this
It's the thing.
later.
It's the thing.
Every
It
time.
is the thing. It's like,
Yeah.
yep.
But if you don't
And
ask, you're just up in there, they're just in their armor and they're all like protective and have to be the smartest
Yes.
person in the room. They're not going to be like, actually, I've been keeping myself up at night thinking about how this could fail because we don't have a URL redirect strategy. Well, I can help with that. Like we could get that together, you know?
Yeah. And the other fascinating bit about this very sort of unique position is that we get to do that with like different people that are sometimes in conflict with one another.
Yes.
And I think that that's always been a really fascinating dynamic because when you make those individual connections and you're able to sort of like lay that, you know, like build that bond, hear them out, truly understand their position. Again, asking how are you and actually caring about what the answer is. And then you're able to sort of like hold this up and tell that to everyone kind of collectively and help people understand that it's like, as cliche as it is, it's like, man, like your feelings are valid. And like a lot of everyone feels a certain way and they're operating in a certain place, in a certain system, incentivized by certain things, rewarded by certain things, punished by certain things. And that is sometimes different than the other people that are incentivized and rewarded in different ways and punished in different ways. And whenever you're able to just like tell all of that coherently, everybody's like, oh, like, yeah, that kind of makes sense that they would, if I was in that position,
That's how
I would be,
Yeah.
that's how I would be as well. So there's something really interesting to that. And I'm happy to take those lessons out into a different place and specifically the world. Cause I think that this is what plays out, you know, across political divides, across like all sorts of things, different, just, you know, whatever, community meetings or school board meetings or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that ability to just like understand and listen and make those connections by kind of like following through and getting to the other side of it, you end up with, guess what? Oh, I'm scared about this. I care about the health and safety of my family. I'm worried about them. And I just want to take good care of them. And then at the end of the day, irrespective of what views or positions they hold, guess what? Everybody,
Everybody,
they want their family to be safe.
yep, we're all people. I have there's a metaphor in my first book about being the coffee filter, not the grounds. And this idea that like in the role of information architect, it's really important that we don't add any more of the grounds when we're trying to clarify things for other people. It's like you don't need to bring your ego and your opinion into this. Like this is a time where you are taking other people's opinions and other people's baggage and bullshit, and you are trying to make something clear and drinkable and delicious out of it. And that does not require you to put more grit into the system, you know? So I think about that a lot.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always good advice. Sometimes you should be the ground, you know, like it's only when you're an information architect that you should be the filter. But
well,
I think it's an important.
But that's a tool. It's like knowing when to deploy certain skills, right? It's like sometimes like taking a backseat, like, you know, as a musician, it's like, is it my time? Am I up center stage? Am I the one sort of like shredding this solo, or am I supporting, right? And it's kind of like over time and having your toolkit of things, but it's like to have the humility to be the coffee filter is I think a real hard-earned skill to develop.
Yeah, it's about discernment has been how I've been talking about it with my students for the last couple of years. It's like we have all of these different approaches that we could take with people. And if you're not careful, you get stuck in one mode and you're always just kind of like going at people with the same mode. And that generally doesn't work. If you're in a certain environment, maybe it's incentivized that it does. But for the most part, like in your career, that will not work. You will not be able to be the same all of the time to every single person. Instead, it's about the discernment to know when to bring out that education moment, when to be the embedded partner, when to be the facilitator and jump up and grab the marker, because it's all everybody's in their head and like you got to get it out. And like knowing kind of how to approach the problem. I think that's the thing that I'm the most interested in teaching now that I'm outside of the world of consulting. It's like I can see it in a really clear way now that I'm not trying to get through it myself, you know, and like
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So,
but in adding one more crucial tool to the pile is the willingness to say, I don't know, or I've never encountered this, or I'm bad at this.
Yes. Or like
it's just being like, oh, okay.
Yeah, or like acknowledging that at the beginning of a project, especially an ambiguous, complex project, that we actually don't know how we're going to do this yet as a collective. Like we are in, as I like to say, the land of not knowing, and we are going to hopefully get to the land of knowing, but it might be a rocky road between those two places. I'll be honest, like it gets, but if everybody admits that they're on that journey versus your ego pretending that you're already living and knowing and you're just waiting for everybody else to arrive, it's like that is a completely different posture to go with the team. So I see a lot of people fail from that standpoint of like pretending that they know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. Nobody does.
We're bringing it all full circle. I think it's nobody knows what's going on, but we're here, and let's be human to each other, and you know, do good things together as a result. So
exactly,
that might be a good place to wrap it up. So the only other structured question on the show is what music do you want more people to know about?
Okay, so I have an answer for this. And I went back and forth on whether or not this was a decent answer because I feel like it's well-trodden territory. It's not like unknown. But because we're talking about community, I think more people should listen to the Grateful Dead. Full disclosure, TMI, I was conceived at a Grateful Dead concert in 1980.
Hell yeah.
What? And so I'm very connected to the music. I was one of those like little kids at the Dead concert in the mud with the hippie skirts. So that's definitely like a big part of my upbringing. And it's like that music is my like nostalgia, like just straight up. But I feel like there is something about like the community aspect of the Dead that is just fascinating, long-standing, and just some of the best people that I've ever met have like spent time following that band or have like had periods falling into them. So yeah, I don't know. If you've never listened to the Grateful Dead, go listen to the Grateful Dead. Not their studio albums though. Like don't go doing that. That's not fun. Listen to something else. Yeah.
What live album would you for the uninitiated or for somebody that's like
I'm not a tape
kind of wrote them off in a certain way?
No, I'm not a tape head. I'm not a tape head at all. I would say like, you know, go to Dick's Picks and like, you know, I trust Dick. That's what I do. Go to Dick's Picks.
Live at the Mars Hotel is my
there you go.
That's yeah. Dick's Picks. They exhibited something and just exuded something that ultimately cultivated this huge community. And there is this feeling of dialed in, like they're dialed into the right frequency, I
Yeah, it's
think.
like
And so there's
they're like
something.
doing something with they have their own little economy of favors and gifts and mutual aid and like yeah, it's just amazing. Like you could go to a Dead show anywhere. And even now, like they've really like the Further Festival held it up for a while. Now Dead and Company has held it up as well. Like we've
Mhm.
lost a lot of the members at this time, and like still like the music lives on because of the community. And I think that that's really like amazing. Like just that people are
It is.
willing to ship of theses this band, you know, until God knows what. I think it's so cool.
And it really is. It's like it's this snowball that over the like literal decades, like
Yeah.
many decades now, it just continues
Yeah.
to roll on. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So
My parents followed
fantastic.
them for a while, and I think that that was like a it was a very foundational part of my childhood. Was like growing up
I
with it.
bet.
Follow the Dead.
I bet. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Amazing. And last real question is where can people go to learn more about you, follow you, and
Yeah,
check out what you're up to?
I am not much of a social media person, so I don't really suggest you follow me there. Although I guess you could. I am at abbycovert.com. Everything I've ever written is there. At least everything that I want other people to read. And then the sensemakersclub.com is a good place to check out what I've been doing most recently. We're a membership club. We run a meeting every single weekday. And so that's about 300 meetings a year. We have 40 discussion leaders that are trained to hold space, not fill space. And yeah, we're just coming up on about 170 members 2 years in. So yeah, come check us out.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you, Abby. Thanks for being here for the great conversation. And yeah, it was great to meet you.
Same, dude. I really feel like parasocially, I felt like I knew you, but we did not.
Yeah.
This was cool.
Great way to be. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. So.
Thanks.